In the House, Brad White, Executive Director, Mississippi Department of Transportation. Brad, it was a great place for family, and it's hard to believe it's 20 years that park has been here.
It's been a great place to go.
It's going to be missed. I'm hoping against hope, and I haven't heard anything about it. And I don't know the inside because I haven't been checking on that one, placing any calls or anything. But I'm just hoping somebody picks it up.
Yeah, I do too, and I'm sure there'll be people looking at it.
Yeah. Can we talk a little politics from a guy who was in Washington for a while before we get to the highway stuff? I mean,
sure.
I know that's on your mind too. Your overview of what is going on in Washington D.C. and the amazing things that could happen with Trump, and how bad things could be if we go 4 more years. And there are a lot of people who are saying that. If you like what Biden has done, hang on, because it's going to be on steroids with this lady.
Well, I think there is a clear difference in the direction that the two administrations would go in, depending upon who won the election. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think my overarching thoughts as I've watched everything is just I think it's really unfortunate the tone that everything has taken in this country when it comes to politics. I hate the nastiness of it. I don't know how we, as somebody that used to try to recruit candidates for the Republican Party years ago, I don't know how you talk good people into getting into politics when they realize what they and their families potentially could go through, and that's from the president all the way down to local races. But at the end of the day, I think the people will have a very clear choice of what direction they want the country to go in if they're looking at the policies that the two administrations would do, and we'll just have to see how that shakes out.
When you were in a room with Senator Thad Cochran as his chief of staff of those years, and you hear some of the diatribes on the floor that are so anti-American, from the Odd Squad to others, I kind of wonder what Thad would say today.
Well, he used to, or I say he didn't say this regularly, but one time he commented that he thought one of the worst things that ever happened to the U.S. Senate was when they put cameras on the floor. Because at the time that he entered the Senate, when senators went to the floor, it was truly to speak to their colleagues, to state a position and policy, to try to persuade folks to go in a certain direction. And as soon as cameras were added, then you started having a lot of people that just gave speeches for the
showboating,
the cuts that would be on television or now in today's world with social media, what they can use. And we saw that even completely on our side. Senator Cochran was in the Senate for 2 years before he gave his maiden speech on the floor. When Senator Hyde Smith went, I believe we were, in my opinion, we had no choice but to get her to the floor to speak on Justice Kavanaugh. Yep. And I don't think she had been in office for more than a month, maybe, when that happened. I could be missing that for a little bit. But that goes back to, I think, the tone and the rhetoric and just the new dynamics that are politics today that I think is somewhat unfortunate.
Well, in the old days when you heard some of this rhetoric, it was rhetoric from somebody outside the Capitol that, carried a communist flag or something. But now you're hearing it. For instance, Tricia McLaughlin had a Democrat on CNN the other day.
Can I ask you a question? Because there was American flag burnings outside the DNC. There has been a lot of commentary on that.
People have the right to burn flags.
Tricia, by the way, was with the Trump administration, and she said there was a flag burning outside the Capitol. And here is a congressman on the Democrat side.
Can I ask you a question? Because there was American flag burnings outside the DNC. There has been a lot of commentary on that.
People have the right to burn flags.
And they absolutely do. But it's not, let's be real, it's not patriotic.
It is absolutely patriotic to burn a flag. It is absolutely patriotic. It's part of being an American means respecting the right of people to disagree with America.
But it also means respecting the flag.
It is absolutely patriotic to burn a flag.
How do you answer that? Absolutely patriotic to burn a flag.
We've had moments like this in our nation's history before, but fortunately for us, that's when we had leaders that stepped up, that found a way to try to unite Americans rather than divide, and you had people like Grover Cleveland, L. Keesley Lamar from Mississippi that did that following the Civil War. You had Ronald Reagan that stepped up following the nasty 60s and early 70s with the Vietnam War and all of the various different culture wars that we had. And hopefully that's something that we'll see coming in the future as an opportunity to have the type of messaging and the type of government that would draw people together. You know, Governor Barber used to say that good policy makes good politics. And I think as Republicans, when we're talking about policy and the direction that we want to take our country or our state, we win.
Yeah.
And I just hope that we can see that.
Speaking of which, the good governor joins me tomorrow. He'll be on the air with me tomorrow, Governor Haley Barbour. The administration has caused problems in so many different areas, but coming back to target we're here for to talk about transportation. He's actually thrown the transportation, the entire transportation of this country, in kind of a mess here, because after pushing all of this stuff and mandating EVs, now the EVs are just, I mean, it's like they're down for the second count, and we're not sure if they're going to go down for third. It's just not happening. People are pulling back on this. In California, they have so many EVs that are on the road. Their fuel tax is shot. They don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And they're already in the hole billions of dollars as far as transportation is concerned.
Yeah, and that has been something that the Biden administration has pushed very hard. And I will tell you, of all the things that I've had to deal with since going back to the Department of Transportation, that has been the most unpopular program that the federal government has given us to institute, primarily because most Mississippians don't believe that the government or our tax dollars should be involved in propping up some type of industry like that. So it has been, in many ways, a disappointment, you know, and we want to get back into the business of building highways, bridges, having the resources to help build out our rail system, our aeronautics, our water ports, our public transit system around the state. And so that's the kind of business that we're in and what we want to focus on, and hopefully we'll see an ability to have the resources and tools necessary with which to do that in a major way.
Brad White, Executive Director, Mississippi Department of Transportation. It's one of the things when we talk about a better future in Mississippi, we spend a lot of time talking about workforce development. We talk about all of those, but part of that long-term plan to make sure we take Mississippi to the next step is certainly infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got to have that. It is it's part of every discussion as far as any company who wants to come into our state.
Yeah, as Senator Trent Lott used to say, if they can't get here, they're not coming. You know?
Good point.
But I mean, it's a major tenet in economic development. It's a major tenet in community development. I think it's a core function of government. One of the few things that the taxpayers of the state expect government to provide them a top-notch infrastructure system, because that's what they're paying their taxes for. And
go ahead.
No, I'm just stating that it's been, you know, over 35 years, I think, since we've had a major look at the funding system of the Mississippi Department of Transportation. And in order for us to be able to run what's basically a reimbursement program, that we work hand in glove with the Federal Highway Administration in order to accommodate all the needs we have across the state, both from maintenance and in new construction. We're in desperate need of a re-looking at that and a modernization, if you will, of what that funding system looks like.
I'm a little bit surprised over the years, certainly during the Obama years leading into Biden, that they haven't raised the federal level from the 18.5 cents. They've gone up on everything else, and I'm a little bit surprised.
Well, oddly enough, I would tell you, Senator McConnell, while he was has been Republican leader in the Senate, has pushed against any raising of taxes, including the fuel tax.
Yep. We got more coming up. We'll talk about that when we return with Brad White, the Executive Director, Department of Transportation. JT joins us. JT Mitchell, coming up at 8:35. We are on a Monday. Back to our guest, Brad White, the Executive Director of the Department of Transportation. We got close last year. You can see this if you've done this long enough, and you have, where there is outright no consideration of a project at all. Some people think it's too much to do. And then slowly but surely it forms and takes root. And last year it seemed like we had all of the ingredients for something to put together as far as a funding program on a regular basis. Ryan Miller in Oxford just sent me a note. He says it does no good to land a major economic development project if we don't have the infrastructure in place or soon to be in place to match the enormity of those projects. and we're getting some big projects here. So where are we? You tell us as the executive director, where are we now with the possibility of laying the groundwork to get something done to provide the Department of Transportation with a permanent solution to this as far as funding and not have to worry about it year after year?
Well, I think over the last 3 years, we've been successful in setting the table in a way that the legislature now has confidence in the Department of Transportation to trust us with money and trust that we're going to put the money where their constituents want it to go. And for the last 3 years, the legislature has supported not just projects, but our programs that build the projects out, both from a maintenance side as well as from this capacity construction side, which are the big projects that we break ground, cut ribbons on, turning 2 lanes into 4 lanes, bypasses, et cetera. And that's all been very good, and I believe that everybody under the Capitol Dome supports transportation and infrastructure of all the different modes of transportation, so I think that's good. So I think we have a situation where the legislature has confidence in the department. They recognize the need. They see, due to the other economic, like Ryan was saying, the economic development prospects that have been brought into the state, they recognize that the infrastructure surrounding those types of projects are always key in the conversation that it takes to land those projects. And so now I believe that they've also have a better understanding of how our funding system works, in that in order for us to be able to do what we need to do, the industry that does the work for us, they have to be able to plan out and budget years in advance. We have to be able to do that. These projects take sometimes 8 years from conception to construction. And so the conversation slowly but surely has moved to how do we provide a more modern system that provides a dedicated stream of revenue to the Department of Transportation where we can continue cash flowing all of this work. We've provided the legislature this past session with ideas that we believe would have allowed for them to do that without having to raise taxes. For example, giving the department an additional 15% of the use tax the way they do the cities and counties, and allow that to come in to go to construction. Some of the gaming revenue that's collected, I mean, the better our highways and bridge system are, the better that people are going to be able to travel through and within the state to get to the different destination sites. So there are streams of revenue within our budget that I believe that could be used to help take up the deficit that we currently have, and from maintenance to construction. And so I think everybody's attention is on it now. It's just whether or not we can find a champion that's going to come up with the right idea and then start pushing it through. And I'm very excited about the conversations that we've been having with Speaker White and Chairman Lamar out of the House of Representatives. I know they've got a symposium coming up soon where I believe this is going to be a major part of the conversation there about how do we provide for this core function of government. The Lieutenant Governor has reached out. He's been a big proponent of the department the last 3 years. He's reached out to me and asked for us to provide him again with a list of some concepts that might work in providing us the type of dedicated stream of revenue that we need in order to carry this out. And I do think it's important. Look, I'll give you an example. We've got situations when you talk about economic development. We've got situations around the state where you're dealing with what the local government would consider major economic development, where a development's going to come to a place on our system and it's going to require certain improvements to that system. But the impact that big development's going to have on the traffic and the safety and the efficiency of the system impacts a lot of that area, that route, that's not around that particular development. And so unfortunately, when we don't have the revenue there, it falls back on that developer then, that if they want to go there, how do they help pay to do all of these developments? And I believe it's right for them to have to do the developments in front of their business and all, but we as a department should be in the position to where we're able to keep our system overall at an efficiency level that doesn't fall back on someone that's trying to bring jobs and more revenue into the state. So I think it's very important that this core function of government, that our leadership looks at how are we going to fund it, recognizes that one-time money is great, but it's not going to cure anything long term, and find a way to provide a dedicated stream of revenue that will allow us to work into the future and continue this conveyor belt of projects that makes our transportation system around the state safer, more efficient, and easier to navigate.
I don't think it's any different than any other business. If you're in a business and you're one of the departments, and you got to go year to year wondering what your budget's going to be, if you can have as you said, a continuous stream for the future, you can plan more. And it's got to be a greater efficiency on that also.
Correct. Well, I mean, it's not just that we get money. It's how we get the money that's important. I mean, when the Federal Highway Administration is reauthorized by Congress every 5 years, and for example, Mississippi gets $3.5 billion in the current 5-year authorization, that money doesn't come to Mississippi and sit in an account for us to spend along with our state money. We have to spend our state revenue first. And when the Federal Highway Administration can look at what we're doing, and they can have comfort and confidence that we're doing it all in accordance to their standards, then they reimburse us with the federal money that's been allocated for us. So our ability to cash flow projects is key. And without adding to the dedicated stream of revenue we have, we run the risk of leaving federal funds on the table. We run the risk of doing what the commission, back when our old friend Dick Hall was chairman about 12 years ago, the commission realized that the funding stream that the department had, we couldn't continue the capacity construction program. So they had to divert everything to maintenance in order to maintain things. So that's why you have traffic problems in DeSoto County, the Gulf Coast, the Jackson area, Vicksburg on I-20. The reason you have these issues now around the state and areas is because the program that we operate that's designed to keep our system efficient was put on a shelf because we could not cash flow the money necessary to keep that program moving. And so the one-time infusions of funds the legislature has given us over the last 2 or 3 years has been phenomenal in helping us move this program back into being a functioning part of what the department does. But without additional dedicated revenue, we're going to have to go back to maintenance, and we're just going to move backwards.
Brad, have we ever left any money on the table as far as Fed dollars? Have we done that?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I think over the years, I'm sure you could find an earmark or something like that that maybe wasn't spent appropriately. But so far we've been able to put up all of the money necessary to get the extra money. Senator Wicker was the lead Republican on the committee that handled the reauthorization of federal highway for this current 5-year segment, and he was able to get an extra $1 billion in our authorization. That would have taken about a $40 million a year hit to our state revenue in order to be able to draw down that money. Luckily, the state legislature was in a position that each of the first 3 years of that 5-year authorization, they've given us the $40 million so that we didn't have to raid our maintenance fund in order to access that federal money. Now, had the state not been in a financial position to do that, I don't know where we would have been. And so again, that's why we have to look at the funding model and make sure that it's adequate for the department to be able to carry out what we do. And I believe you can do that without raising taxes.
Final segment coming up in a moment with Brad White, Executive Director. And I think the number is around $400 million if you're looking at what that magic number is. Is that
$485 million deficit in maintenance.
400 in maintenance.
Maintenance. That's before you get into what would be next. Now that's ideal. That's ideal, and I'm I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I don't think we're going to get all of that in one lick. But,
but what? It wouldn't be a nightmare if that happened, though, would it? All right, we'll have a final segment coming up next.
Thanks.
Final segment with Brad White, Executive Director. So the gasoline prices in our state, they haven't been that bad. I mean, they're not where they were 4 years ago, but about $2.90 a gallon. Unless you get to those southern river cities or counties, it's like $3.25. In, where was it, Claiborne County? $3.30 a gallon in Claiborne County. That's the average there, but nationwide, about $3.35 a gallon. And my understanding is oil is going up a little bit, so it's very difficult to even talk about more on taxes with the prices that high. If they were consistently what they were during the Trump administration, that would be something that I think wouldn't be such a political hot potato. But you know the areas that you want to concentrate on, and do you feel like those are good mechanisms to reach where you need to be? As far as possibly on gaming, where I think one of the bills was instead of doing it by a dollar amount, do it by a percentage amount, over 20%.
Right. Senator Briggs Hobson and Senator Jennifer Branning had legislation in the Senate that we proposed to them that would have given the department portions by percentage of use tax revenue, gaming revenue, items like that. And let me say, I know that the conversation in the past has always centered around whether or not you increase the fuel tax in order to fund the department, because primarily that's the basket that all of our eggs have been in. Personally, I think that it's smarter and better for the taxpayer if we have a more diversified funding model where you can dedicate streams of revenue from various places that collectively would basically eradicate the deficits that we have and allow us to move forward. And the budget wouldn't necessarily take such a gigantic hit. But we had opportunities in the past session. I know Representative Trey Lamar had a legislation that would have applied different revenue adjusting of the fuel tax. So we'll see. I mean, they're the policymakers. I mean, it's kind of like the old saying, they're the doctors, I'm just holding the bag.
Yeah.
And whatever cards we dealt, we're going to play. But I just hope that we can further the conversation to getting to a point that we have a real solution that is a gigantic first step toward providing the revenue that would allow us to provide the services that the taxpayers expect.
Bob in Etowah says, what about toll roads? And I think we've been there before as far as that's talking about.
Whenever I was with the department years ago, for whatever reason, the department didn't have the authority to build toll roads. And I believe I'm remembering this correctly, that the legislature gave us the authority to build toll roads if it was a secondary route. In other words, the project that comes to mind was the old High Street Extension or Airport Parkway that would have connected High Street and downtown Jackson to the airport. Well, that could have been a toll road because if someone didn't want to pay the toll, they could use I-20 or they could use Lakeland Drive. But the truth of the matter is that's been looked at numerous times around the state by various companies, and the economics just don't make sense. The business model is not there for the private end of that partnership to want to step up and to invest in that.
Then when you're talking about a long term, my goodness, the subsequent to 49 down to the coast, you're talking gazillions of dollars. We even had that talked about for a while. It was a British firm or somebody like that was talking about that as a possibility, and I have no idea.
Building an interstate standard highway from Jackson to the coast. Yeah, that's been discussed a long time because it's certainly something that is needed. And I think 20 years ago the price tag on that was something like $3 or $4 billion.
Yes, yeah. I can't even imagine what it would be today, and who's going to bankroll that. Not the way things are going anyway. Your final thoughts, sir?
Well, I'm encouraged. I think that, as I said earlier, the leadership and the membership of the legislature, I think, are very much pro-transportation. I think it's just getting to a point where we're actually sitting down at the table and coming up with viable options that provide a dedicated stream of revenue that allows for these programs that we have to continue moving forward. And the conversations that we've had, as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, have increasingly become more and more substantive. And they have put their money where their mouth is. They being the legislature. The last 3 years, they've given us everything that we've asked for in the way of freedom and flexibility within our budget and the ability to move salaries in order to solve that issue of bleeding employees, the ability to have money to jumpstart the capacity construction program and build projects around the state. All that's left now is dealing with the dedicated stream of revenue necessary that these services continue even when the state hits in bad times.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why, Brad, that's so important in a way that we don't think about. It's kind of like Ole Miss and everybody talking now, is it the top 5, top 6? Can you do this? Can you do it? You look at a different level of achievement expectations. And with Amazon coming in, with the deal in Marshall County, with everything else that's happening from the data centers to the battery to all of the other projects we have, we're at a different level now. And that means more people are on the phone calling about coming in. So the projects get bigger and bigger. And the expectations are at another level.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your health insurance is if your ambulance gets stuck in traffic on the way to the hospital.
I'll leave you with that. Thank you, sir.